What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Around the League podcast. I'm your host, Cody. Got my guy, Rob, here. Rob, how we doing today?
Doing well, man. Doing well. Excited to talk some football, and we're kind of starting to see some things unfold in the NFL, kind of seeing who our contenders are. And we're going to get into that in a little bit, but I'm excited to chat about it.
Yeah, we actually had a fun little segment last week where we kind of went through yay or nay with some of the 2-0 teams that were on the list there, even some of the ones that we came into the season expecting them to be 2-0 up going into week 3. And it was kind of fun. So, we talked about it. I like your idea where we laid out. We're going to turn that into a segment here. So I know we've kind of been bringing 3 items to the table, tossing it back and forth a little bit. So today, obviously, we're going to start with 3 discussion points, 3 things we're looking for heading into week 4, or 3 things that we've picked up on coming out of week 3 that we just want to hit on. We think they're big topics, important topics, and we want to go a little deeper on them. Then what we got for you guys is we're going to segue into a segment called Who's for Real, Who's a Fraud, and Who's Up for Debate. I think that one's going to be fun. So obviously we're going to first go through the Who's for Real. We got a list of teams that we think are for real. We're going to start with the division winners, and we're going to go through all the division leaders, that we have through week 3 thus far. And we're going to label them as for real or for frauds. And we got a list of teams that we view as contenders, potentially contenders, and whether or not they're still up for debate. So that's going to be that segment. I think it's going to be a fun one. And then we're going to round it out with some questions we have surrounding those teams that we do view as up for debate, what they got to do to get it together, will they get it together, and what's got to break right, whether it's injuries, coaching, whatever it might be. So I think it's going to be a fun one. That's what we got laid out for you guys today. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. And our first discussion item for today, I think, is one that you just absolutely have to touch on. We know Lamar Jackson is a pretty polarizing player. We talked about that. I talked about that with Tolson, a guy over at Raven Up. Go check him out. By the way, great show over there. But we talked a lot about in the Ravens preview where Lamar is just a polarizing player. He's got great peripheral stats. He always seems to be underrated. You can either love him or hate him. And the hate surrounding Lamar honestly never really made sense. He's coming into this year up for a contract and everything. And there's just a lot of debate on whether or not he's worth it. Was the offer he turned down? Was that a smart move? Whatever it might be. There's even talk after that Jets win after week 1, which I think was just stupid conversation about whether or not he was protecting himself until he gets his big payday because he didn't run much. I mean, with all due respect to your Jets there, Rob, it was the Jets. They were leading by 20 points most of the game. He didn't need to run. And in the last couple of weeks, we've seen him absolutely blow up. He's in MVP form. And honestly, he's breaking football right now. Like Hurts, too. A lot of these guys look great. But Lamar, right now, according to Pro Football Focus, he's the number 1 graded quarterback. He leads the league in passing touchdowns. If you're a fantasy guy, he's the number 1 quarterback and the number 11 overall running back. It's just crazy what he's doing right now. So a couple other metrics around him that I think we just have to hit on that are really, really impressive, and it just shows that Lamar is on another level, is the Ravens are actually throwing at the 6th highest rate in the NFL. So right now the Ravens aren't running the ball. I think that's interesting. They've had some offensive line struggles compared to previous years. Obviously, we know that running back room has to get healthy. That's part of it. But they're throwing at the 6th highest rate in the NFL. So Lamar's just not doing this, with Justin Fields type pass attempts and just being super efficient. Not only is he doing it in volume, but he's doing it well against the blitz. He's number 3 in overall success rate against the blitz this year, according to Warren Sharp's analytics. And he's actually, even with the volume they're having, he actually is having one of the most efficient seasons we've seen in the last decade. In fact, it's the most efficient season based off of expected points added per attempt over the last 10 years, which is an unreal stat when you factor in you've got the tail end of Peyton Manning's season with the Broncos when he absolutely annihilated the passing touchdown record. You've got the Josh Allen year when he broke out in there. You got you got the Matt Ryan year when they went to the Super Bowl. Him and Julio were unreal. You've got a lot of one-off years where people had incredibly efficient seasons. You got the Cam year where he was doing it, running and throwing the ball. You've got some really great one-off seasons, and Lamar is by far and away the most efficient through week 3 that anyone else has been over the last 10 years. I think that's an incredible stat showing that at the end of the day, you blitz, he makes you pay, he's worth the money, and he looks unreal. I mean, he accounts for 87% of the Ravens' total yardage at this point, which is an incredible metric. I mean, my thoughts on Lamar are You should have paid the man and locked him up in the offseason, but he has come out just on an absolute tear, which has been fun to watch, not only as a viewer, but it's also something that's clear. It's if he's still polarizing throughout this season, I mean, I get he can get hurt running the ball, but if he's still polarizing after keeping this up throughout the season, I don't know what more people want to see. I mean, Rob, what do you see out of Lamar so far? What did you weren't on the Ravens preview. What were your thoughts on him coming in? Did you view him, were you on either side of that polarizing fence there?
I mean, he's been a solid player the entire time he's been in the NFL. Obviously, he didn't start his first year, but you saw a little glimpse at the end of the year, and then obviously the MVP season came after that. And you said it, he's in MVP form right now. There's no question about it. If the season ended tomorrow, he's the MVP of the league. I mean, he's doing it on, passing and rushing. That's the beauty of it. I mean, last 2 weeks, over 100 yards on the ground and touchdowns on the ground, plus 3 and 4 touchdowns in the air. So like, he's doing it all. This team is absolutely going to lock him up at the end of the year if he chooses to stay with them. But if you're familiar with baseball, it's a lot like the Aaron Judge situation going on in New York right now with the Yankees. Like he basically said, I'm betting on myself. Watch what I can do. I'm worth the money, worth the guaranteed money, because that's what the dispute was. And he's killing it for them right now. And you say, like, even going back to that Jets game, I remember watching that game and I was like, gosh, he just makes it look so easy. He looks like everything's in slow motion out there for him. The way he moves, the way he evades pass rushers, and then if he gets outside the pocket and it looks like you have a sure sack, you take him 10 times out of 10 getting out of that situation. Like, he's just so slippery, so shifty, just an absolute dynamic player. And it's so fun to watch him, but it's also so frustrating to play against him just because he is like a video game player. He's putting up video game numbers. He's everything you want in a quarterback. I mean, he's proving that he can throw the ball, but also his danger on the ground is you always have to spy him, and if you don't, he'll make you pay. Even if you do spy him, he's probably good enough to get around your spy. So there's just so much that goes into this guy's game that it's just incredible. And I think a lot of people doubted him coming into, his NFL career. He did this in college, this exact thing. Mm-hmm. He was the exact same player in college, was, dangerous on the ground. He could throw the ball deep. Maybe not as perfectly accurate, but I mean, he's proving now that he can be accurate. I mean, he's doing everything that the Ravens asked him to do, or are asking him to do, and he's proving it that he earns, he deserves that contract. And I don't think there's any reason he shouldn't get that contract by the end of the year.
Yeah, zero doubt at all. I think the most impressive part is that he's the number one graded passer. Like, it's not just that he's doing it with his legs.
That was the question. Yeah.
I mean, and that was the thing. And it's, I don't know what more people want to see from him. I hope he keeps it up. We know, just some other notes on Lamar here is they were the number one team in the AFC through week 8 last year until he got hurt. And then they clearly, we saw that collapse down there in Baltimore overall, where really they lost several close games that would typically, at least one or two of those would break their way in a normal season. So I think those are some things to note in hindsight. They coming into this season, it's not like they, were in any sort of rebuild mode. It's almost like they were forgotten after the run the Bengals had. But I viewed them still as the favorites in the division coming into this season for a number of reasons. Lamar being one of them, and just having a complete team being another one of them. Now, I do think one of the things that they got to fix is that secondary. They had a ton of injuries last year, and you could just throw the ball on them a ton. I know you and I would always stack teams in them against DFS. They've had some injuries again this season that have really slowed them down. They were in that, they gave up that massive lead to Miami, where if they don't, blow that, I think they were up 35-14, right? And they blew that, ended up losing. But even yesterday against the Patriots, they were giving up a lot downfield. I know they got a lot of injuries, but I mean, I do think that they got to fix that issue if they're going to win the AFC and contend for an AFC championship. I know we'll get to some of that later, but that's just kind of something to watch there in Baltimore as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're poised to have a good year, though. I think regardless of these injuries, I think he's going to lead them to a really solid year. And I think we've seen them in the playoffs. I just think this team looks different. He looks different. I mean, he's already got one MVP under his belt. I don't think he's looking for another one. He's looking to win now at this point. So I think this is the year that they're going to try to take that jump, and they have a legitimate shot. The AFC is wide open. So we'll see what happens.
So the next point we're going to cover here is actually going to be Trevor Lawrence and the Jags, and then we're going to round it up by just a little discussion around the NFL offenses across the league as we wrap up this segment. But, Rob, Trevor Lawrence and the Jags was the number one thing I wanted to watch going into week one. I left week one, when we reviewed what happened, I just said, meh. Right. I wanted to see what some of these second-year quarterbacks were looking like. And I said, no, Trevor Lawrence, there's some missed opportunities, missed throws that I think you really, really got to capitalize on. And he's got to clean those up. But, we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. I mean, what the Jags have done have been incredible. They shut out the Colts, blew out the Chargers. I know the Chargers had several injuries too, but the Chargers defense is a legit defense. Like, they're not a bad defense at all. So I thought that was impressive to hang, I think, 38 points on them. And really, the game wasn't close at all. Trevor Lawrence looked really good. He's cleaned up some of these things. And so I think as we look at Trevor Lawrence now, it's kind of one of those things where, as we've discussed in the past, the organization and the coaching staff matters. Like, what you put around a young quarterback really, really matters, and how you help them grow and adjust are really, really important. So a couple of things that I did want to hit on was his success against the blitz as well. We talked about Lamar. Lamar is killing it against the blitz this year. He makes you pay. Trevor Lawrence struggled last year in our team preview pod. Ooze and I talked about his struggles on second down, how it was just odd, how situationally he really, really struggled there. He struggled against the blitz. Last year, he had a 37% success rate against the blitz. We know I think he broke Peyton's interception record. This year, he's improved for a couple reasons. And this goes into not just his development, but also the coaching staff. 58% success rate against the blitz. We know he's getting the ball out quicker. This is a fun stat per Warren Sharp as well, is that he's actually getting the ball out in under 2.5 seconds, about 2.2 seconds exactly, which essentially, I like to dive into the data, but at the end of the day, that means if a blitz is coming, he's getting his hot read, he's getting it out of his hand quickly, and it's opening up a lot. He's limiting his turnovers. It's opening up that offense some. They're scheming guys open. And I think this is really helping him build that confidence that he needed last year, and it's helping him create that consistency throughout a game. And you see that offense throughout a game improve. You see some offenses like that after that first drive that they have, it's laid out perfectly for them, and if they don't score on that, it's struggle the rest of the game before they finally get something going because it's totally scripted. It looks like with the Jags, they continue to improve throughout the game. It's like they build upon the script that they laid out in the opening drive, which is really, really impressive as the Jags have opened up this season. And I think they've actually, through 3 weeks, have exceeded expectations, and Trevor Lawrence is finally looking a lot more like the guy we thought he would look like coming into this season and as the number one overall draft pick. I mean, what are you thinking about Trevor Lawrence? And I mean, give me your thoughts on just organization, coaching staff, with overall how it impacts a young quarterback.
Well, we talked about it last week, I think, or the week before, I forget. But how impactful coaches are on young quarterbacks, especially. I mean, we talk about Mahomes and Josh Allen. Some of the better quarterbacks in the league, they have great coaches. Then we discussed someone like Zach Wilson, who we don't know yet, and we also don't really know fully yet about the coach. So that's kind of up in the air. But we already know Doug Peterson did some good things in Philadelphia. I know he had one Super Bowl year and then kind of fell off after that. But there's a lot of factors that go into that. I'm sure the Eagle Up guys will have plenty of things to say about that. But we know he has had success, and we're seeing success with the Jags now. We're going to talk a little bit more about them in a bit, but I don't know. If you can improve week by week and it's only week 3, I mean, that's a really good sign, especially for a team that's in a division that is wide open. Yep. We talked about that last week as well. There's one team coming out of that division. I don't think it's the Colts. I don't think it's the Texans. It could very well be the Jags. So I know the Colts snuck a win away from the Chiefs this past week, but no one saw that coming. I don't think they're that good. I think the Jags look better. I think Christian Kirk has really opened up the field for Trevor Lawrence to get some of these other guys involved that we were thinking in past years they were good, like guys like DJ Chark, who had a great year a couple years ago. He's starting to improve again now with a guy like Christian Kirk on the field, opening things up for him, and Trevor Lawrence getting the ball out quickly. And that's going to be a great test for Lawrence this week. He goes up against a good Eagles pass rush. He's struggled with that in the past, as you discussed, but this year seems different. I mean, I'm excited to see him. I know I said it in previous weeks. I'm a big Trevor Lawrence fan. Love the guy in high school, loved him in college. Love to see him succeed, and I think he is showing glimpses of that franchise quarterback. And if he can keep up this steady play for the year, they don't have to do anything special. They don't have to make the playoffs or make a run or anything like that. Like if he just shows improvement, they have these guys signed for a couple of years. These guys are going to build around each other, and I think he's just been phenomenal. I mean, 83% pass completion rate week 2, 72% last week. Like, the guy's on fire, and if he can stay within that range, it doesn't even have to be as good as it was last week. If he can be decent or better than decent, like, I don't know, just somewhere in that, not necessarily elite, but good enough in your second year as a franchise quarterback, I mean, that's huge, especially in a city like Jacksonville where they've struggled for so many years. So it's fun to watch. Looks like they're starting to put the pieces together, and maybe Doug Peterson kind of found his home. We'll see.
Yeah, he might have. And, one of the things you mentioned last week when we're talking about coaching staffs, we did bring up Christian Kirk, about how Peterson has schemed him open. Now we're just seeing that across the board. Zay Jones, even with his connection, and, he's turned into a really solid number 2 for them. So Peterson's doing a great job down there. We'll see if that continues throughout the course of the season or if he gets found out. How does he adjust? But I think we're in agreement that what's happening in Jacksonville is exciting, and it's fun to see these young quarterbacks kind of grow and build. And really improve, because it's not been that pretty for a lot of the second-year quarterbacks across the league.
By the way, I said DJ Chark, totally meant Zay Jones. I'm glad you just brought that up. Yeah, just want to correct that.
It's actually not that pretty across the league for a lot of other teams, and this brings us to our final point as we round out this first segment here. And what I want to just hit on and get your thoughts on are these NFL offenses through week 3 are scoring the least amount of points in over 5 years. So this was another thing after week 1 that was kind of an outlier, felt like an outlier, where it was the least amount of points scored in week 1 in about 3 years. Obviously, we had just a couple years, the COVID year, and then even last year, where it was offensive shootout after offensive shootout for the first couple weeks of the season, specifically week 1. It's gone the other way, Rob. It's actually been the least amount of points scored through the first 3 weeks in several years, according to ESPN's Mike Clay data for weeks 1 through 3, and he factors in expected points added. It's the least overall in EPA by a wide margin. Expected points added per team is at 13, whereas the second least is right at 18, I believe, over the last 5 years, which is egregiously low. We talked last week about the Bucs and Packers, and that was one where I said I expect this to be a really low-scoring game. Don't take the betting advice, but that's one that it could hit the under easily, and it did. It was a low-scoring game for a number of reasons: injuries. Offenses finding each other, Rodgers getting used to his receivers. The Bucs have just been decimated, so there's a lot of reasons why some of these offenses, especially with injuries, why it's lower scoring. But there's a lot that I don't know why. Like, some questions I have here: have these offenses been figured out? Have we finally allowed a couple seasons for these defenses to adjust? Have we just experienced 2 seasons, 2 COVID years with small crowds, so the offenses weren't being drowned out or anything like that on the road? 2 years of just incredible offense, and now it's just pulled back and it feels more severe than it is. Again, this data goes back to 2017 or 18, though. Is our quarterbacks across the league worse? Do we just only have a couple really good quarterbacks right now? I mean, give me your thoughts, Rob, because I'm sitting here looking at 5 or 6 insanely good offenses, and everyone else just feels like meh. It feels like every game is a slugfest right now.
Yeah, there's definitely certain teams I can say that too. I mean, I knew, for example, was it Monday night? Sunday night, Broncos 49ers. The game was 11-10 was the final score, and it was I think they punted back and forth 9 times each or something like that. It was some stat, just stuff like that, where you expect a team like I don't necessarily expect the 49ers to score a bunch of points, but they've always been defensive minded. But the Broncos, they have a super good offense across the board. I mean, with adding Russell Wilson, especially, you got Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy. Like, you have the pieces. It's just, I have more to say on the Broncos in a bit, but it seems to be a lot of situations like that, and I don't think it has anything to do with, there's not good quarterbacks in the league anymore, or there's only a couple. Like, I think there's good enough teams, and we've seen, I think you said it maybe a week or two ago, that defense doesn't really win championships anymore. Offense does. And I think that's why we look at like the Chiefs and the Bills and the Ravens as like, even the Bucks and the Packers, like as these real Super Bowl contenders, because their offenses are good. They're explosive offenses. They have good quarterbacks, but also those quarterbacks make other guys around them better. Like, look at the Packers. Who the heck are their receivers? No one even knows, but they're one of our contenders. So it's like, I think a lot has to do with the quarterbacks. I don't think other quarterbacks aren't good. I just think there's a tier up here, and then the tier under them is a couple steps below. That could certainly be it. Like, you look at a team like the Giants, who have good offensive weapons, and then Daniel Jones. And it's like, well, that might be a reason. Like Joe Flacco for the Jets is throwing for 300 yards a game. He has good weapons, but like, they're not scoring a ton of points. I don't know. There's certainly a lot of factors that go into it. I think it'll start to level out as the season goes on, but it is an interesting stat to start the season out, and I wouldn't expect that. I don't look too deep into this stuff, but that is really interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, it's just an odd one, because I think it makes red zone a little more fun when it's total shootouts. Yeah. But it could be, at the end of the day, defenses have finally adjusted to some of these 11 personnel sets that offenses have been running, and we're having to see some adjustments. We've even seen the Chiefs adjust when they got found out a little bit last year. I mean, they were still putting up points, but they've gone to more 21 personnel. And obviously, I'm just stealing what other smart people have said, but that just means 2 tight end sets. So that way they get more packed boxes and can open it up downfield. So I think it's a little game of cat and mouse going on there too, along with the tier, like you mentioned, the tiers between quarterbacks. I think that's a good point, where it just feels that gap feels a lot wider than it has been in years past. And it could be that some of these teams have just stacked up on weapons, traded for some of these top receivers. So it'll be interesting to watch this as we head into week 4 and then, go throughout the rest of the season. What kind of happens? Like, does it go back to the mean a little bit? Do we start having some shootouts, et cetera? It remains to be seen. But honestly, that does take us down into our next segment. Obviously, Rob, this is something you laid out for us here. So I'm going to kind of lay out what this segment's going to be again. And I'm going to toss it over to you to let us know who you're thinking is for real, and just kind of take it away so we can have some quick hitters on these division leaders. So obviously, your idea behind this segment, Rob, was just to take all the best records, all the division leaders, because this is the Around the League podcast. We want to hit as many teams as possible while balancing some in-depth analysis alongside some quick hitters for the folks out there. And so we're going to categorize each of these teams into whether or not they're for real, whether or not they're a fraud, and is their status still up for debate? And there was some questions surrounding those up for debate contenders that might not be a division leader at this point. So we'll hit on a couple other teams, Rob. I know you kind of want to hit on the Raiders at some point because you had such high expectations for them coming into the season. But to kick off this segment, man, why don't you lead us right into the for real segment? So why don't you let us know of these division leaders, who you think is for real, and give us a quick thought on how you feel about that.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I will say about the Raiders before I jump in is I did have big expectations for them this year. I thought they were going to be one of the 3 teams out of that division to make the playoffs. Now things have gotten a little crazy in that division, so we'll see what happens. But that'll be kind of in our for debate tab. But for now, I mean, for real, I don't think it's a wild take to have these teams on my for real list. I think it's pretty obvious, but we'll start out with the Dolphins. The Dolphins have been a big, common denominator in all of our podcasts so far this year. So the question was, is Tua capable if he has a good supporting cast? I think he's answered that question pretty well. He's shown that they're clear contenders. Tua has led them, to a 3-0 start. He's looked really good. They just beat a Bills team that we had extremely high expectations for. I still have extremely high expectations for, but they just beat a really good Bills team. So that's my first one to start out with. Next one, I'll go, the team I just talked about, the Bills. I think the Bills are still the number one team in the league. I still think they're the best. I still think they are going to be near a Super Bowl at the end of the year, if not, holding the Lombardi. So that's, one loss does not define them. I mean, certain circumstances, I think you'll kind of touch on it when you speak about them, but they're still my number one ranked team. Going to Philly now, the Eagles. I think the Eagles look phenomenal. Also another common denominator we've talked about through the preseason as well as the first couple weeks. We had high expectations for the Eagles. They're definitely answering that call. Now, if I had to rank those first three, I'd go Bills, and then Eagles and Dolphins I'd put neck and neck right now. I think that would be a phenomenal game. But Eagles look really good. They're loaded with talent and a lot of young talent. And Jalen Hurts is at the head of the snake, and he's a competitor. He's been really, really good. Another team I want to talk about in this for real section, I think the Chiefs. I think, obviously, I mean, you go Mahomes, Andy Reid. They are, one of the best, if not the best, coach-quarterback duo in the NFL. You can never count them out. They're always contenders, always looking to, obviously make a run in the playoffs, and they've been there the past couple of years. When they first won their first Super Bowl a couple of years ago, you thought it was a dynasty. I mean, you thought they were going to be there every single year for the next 5-6 years, and they've been pretty darn close. I don't think this year's any different. Losing Tyreek Hill sucks, but they've shown that they're pretty darn good without him too. Mm-hmm. Someone we already talked about is Lamar Jackson with the Ravens. My next team is the Ravens. He is, as we said before, in MVP form. He looks better than anyone right now, and they're just rolling right now. They lost that tough one to the Dolphins, but they should very well be 3-0, and the Dolphins should be 2-1 at this point. If he stays in this form, I think they have a legitimate shot to win it all. So we'll round it out here with the Packers. Always a contender. Rodgers, potentially one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history. Doesn't look much different this year. Week 1, he looked a little tough, but week 2 and 3, he's looked good. And I think they're only going to get better as the season goes on. I mean, this guy has a tendency to develop weird chemistry with whoever he wants to, kind of similar to Brady. They make other guys great around them. So we're starting to learn some new names in that Packers wide receiver room, and they're making some noise now. So I think that's another team to watch out for.
Yeah, and my thoughts on some of these for reals are, the Dolphins, just another clear instance where the coaching scheme upgraded that team and the quarterback. And then with the Bills, agreed, they're going to be fine. It was a statement game for Miami. We talked about that heat and everything down in Miami in September, coming out in those blue uniforms. This game had insane play volume. You could see the exhaustion. Stephon Diggs cramping up, slowing down the Bills at the end. The Bills are going to be just fine. It was a statement game for Miami. Big win for them. It honestly felt like the Bills lost that game a little more than Miami won that game. But when it comes down to it at the end of the day, both these have good defenses, good personnel, good coaching. I'm taking Josh Allen over Tua any day of the week. I know Tua looks good. And if they meet in the playoffs or something somewhere down the line, that's going to be the tiebreaker. And that's why you have the Bills still as your number one overall team. I have no argument there. Eagles, that's just our preseason prediction coming true. We came into the season saying if Jalen Hurts is just above average, he doesn't even have to be great. He just has to be good, between above average and good. Right now, he looks great throwing the ball, and that means the Eagles' ceiling is just limitless right now. They're NFC contenders, not just NFC East contenders. We picked them to win the division, and we've seen all of that and then some come true. They look phenomenal. To your point about the Chiefs, we've seen the Colts get up for big games like this in the past. We've seen them choke against bad teams like they've done through the first 2 weeks of the season. This just feels like Frank Reich towards the end of September doing what he does, and the Colts saving their season by beating Kansas City. They had to have this game to stay alive in a very, very weak division. And even though the Colts have looked like the worst team in football up until last week, this at least, keeps things alive on their end, and maybe they kind of get some momentum. But it was just a get up spot for them, and they absolutely had to have it. And still, even then, the Chiefs about had this game without playing their best. So obviously, Chiefs are going to be fine. We've seen this happen before. My comments on Lamar, agreed. Excuse me there. And as for Aaron Rodgers, no one else in the NFC North is good enough yet to challenge him. That's it. That's what it comes down to. And with that, I'm going to let you run away with who you think is fraudulent when it comes to some of these division leaders or competitors within a division, because I know not all of these are division leaders. So why don't you give me your frauds?
Yeah, so I'm glad you just said that, and it's a point I left out before about the Raiders. The reason I have the Raiders on this list of frauds is because coming into the year, I did think they were going to, again, be in the playoff race, at least. Starting off 0-3, terrible loss against the Cardinals. First week, I get you played Herbert and the Chargers, but still, they're not really competing at this point anymore, and they don't look good. So I'm kind of out on the Raiders at this point, to be honest. I said it, it's funny, I said in week 2 when the Cardinals were playing the Raiders, I said to my friend who was watching the game with, I was like, do the Cardinals stink? Are they bad? And little did I know they'd come back and win that game. And then this week I said the same thing to the same guy. I'm like, did the Raiders just stink? I think they might. I don't know. I don't know how you can stink with that offense. Derek Carr's pretty capable. Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, they have a good offense. I just don't know what's going on there. So they're the first on my frauds list. And then take a trip back to New York. I don't think the Giants are for real. I think the Giants are frauds at 2-1. I don't think they're going to contend for that division. I think once they play the Eagles, they're going to see, how good the Eagles actually are, how good that, Hurts and the Eagles are, and they're going to be a legitimate contender in the playoffs, I believe. So Giants I'm out on. I do believe they are in the right direction, though. I believe in Dabble. I just do not believe in Daniel Jones. And I think they're going to have to figure that out. I think that's probably on the list of most Giants fans, as well as the front office. They kind of need to move on from Daniel Jones to get themselves back into that contender list. Next team, I'll go back to the AFC West. I am also officially out on the Broncos. I know we've kind of debated back and forth here about the Broncos. I know it's only week 4. I can't watch them anymore. It's just not good. I know they're 2-1, but the teams they played have not been good. They barely beat the Texans. They barely beat the Niners. I know the Niners are historically good, but they won 11-10. I just talked about it before. There was no offense at all in that game. I can't confidently say that they're going to go anywhere this year, because even if you come out of that division, you're coming out into the AFC, which is an absolute gauntlet of teams. So I am out on the Broncos. Next team I'll go to, and we talked about him before, Jacksonville Jaguars. I think Trevor Lawrence is looking like that franchise quarterback. But I still think the Jags need time. I don't think they're legitimate contenders. I don't think anyone really does, but I think they can make some noise this year, have a good year, maybe finish around 500 or right above it, depending. I'm only saying that because that division is just garbage. And they're going to have 6 games in that division that they could win. So I think I'm out on the Jags. And then finally, I'll wrap it up with the Vikings. Don't think the Vikings are that good. I think they're 2-1. I think they have capable pieces. Kirk Cousins is okay. Justin Jefferson has pretty much disappeared in weeks 2 and 3. But if I'm looking at that division, we kind of just talked about it. No one is good enough in that division to beat Rodgers. In a 17-game year, they're not going to outpace the Packers. And then even if you look at the Lions, I don't think the Lions are that far off. I think if I took, the Lions versus the Vikings, I know they just played this past weekend, but I would almost take the Lions. I really like what I'm seeing out of them. So if I'm going to rank the Vikings as 3rd in that division, because the Bears are without a doubt 4th, but if I'm going to rank the Lions as the Vikings as 3rd in that division, I'm out on them, because I don't think 2-1. It's a good start for them, but that's kind of how we're going to see this segment unfold as weeks go on. Will the Vikings stay over 500? Will they eventually fall under? Like, we're going to see a lot of these teams shift. But I think those teams we have on the for real list are intended for, the entire season. They're intended to stick it out through the whole year and kind of still stay towards that top echelon of teams. So I'll round it out there with the Vikings, and I'll let you take over.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you there in terms of the Packers. That's why we have them as a for real, is because the Lions, Vikings just aren't ready. I'm going to give the edge to the Vikings right now. I think the Lions have been fun to watch. They got one of the best offenses in the NFL. They'll always have their ceiling limited with Jared Goff. It's crazy they have one of the best offenses, but we know there's still a limit there because Goff is at the helm. Kirk Cousins is a slight upgrade over Goff, and I'm going to give him the edge there. But I think the Vikings, the Lions, 7-win team is how I viewed them coming into the season. That hasn't changed. The Vikings, an 8 or 9 win team coming into the season. That hasn't changed. The Packers, even as much as they struggled, their floor with Aaron Rodgers is 10 wins, and no one's going to compete with them in the division. So, that's why they're probably going to run away with it again, even if it's close going into weeks 14 or 15. You know who's closing it out. Rodgers is going to close it out. So I'll give the edge to the Vikings there. The rest of yours there, I really don't have a lot of comments apart from the AFC South. It doesn't matter who wins that division. The division sucks. It's terrible. It doesn't matter who wins that division. They're not a contender. The Jags look great. They've been fun to watch. We just, I dove into them a ton earlier in the show. But even if they win the division, they're not a contender. I don't care who wins that division. They're not a contender. And if someone from the AFC South makes it to the Super Bowl, then this pod will be taken down for the end of time. But that's it for me on the front.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we're okay. I think we'll be safe.
If Matt Ryan drags that noodle arm to the AFC Championship, so help me.
Gosh, they looked like the worst team in the NFL the first 2 weeks, and then somehow beat the Chiefs. I don't understand, but
that's literally they did that with Carson Wentz last year, and then Philip Rivers the year before that. It's like. It's just the Colts, man. It's like how Frank Reich operates. Look like the worst team in football and then show up against the good teams. And just croak at the end of the season. It's like clockwork.
I think he's betting on these games. Like he's just taking the I don't know. Well, I'm not going to get into that. But we'll jump into the last part here, which is the third part of the segment, which is for debate. So what teams are kind of maybe not had the best start, or maybe they're also 2-1, and we're still kind of waiting to see a little bit more. So I'm going to start it off with the Bengals. The Bengals, obviously, we talked last week about a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover. And another team on this list is the Rams, but I'll stick with the Bengals for a minute. We're kind of seeing a bit of a Super Bowl hangover. They just beat the Jets, which I know is not the greatest win. But honestly, maybe I'm just a biased Jets fan. I thought the Jets were sort of in that game, like almost late into that game. So I still need to see more out of the Bengals. I do really believe in them. I think their offense is extremely well-rounded. They have not really got Joe Mixon going. So that's another thing to look out for. The offensive line has not been great. Passing game's been all right. T. Higgins looked like an absolute monster last week. So if he can keep that up, I think he's just as valuable as Jamar Chase. Whatever you take that comment how you will, but I think T. Higgins is just as valuable as Jamar Chase in that offense. So that opens up a lot of opportunity for them with him back. So I do expect the Bengals to get closer to that for real list as we move on. I know they're in a tough division, but that kind of leads me into my next team in the same division, which is the Browns. So the Browns, I still don't know about. Jets beat them. Good for me. But at the same time, I just don't know if they're that good. They're a Jets win away from being 3-0, and if they were 3-0, I still think I'd have them in this for debate category, just because I don't know where they're going. Chubb looks phenomenal. He is an absolute workhorse. He's carrying this offense, but outside of him, I don't really trust Brissett to keep them at this level for as long as he needs to. For them to have a legitimate shot later in the season. I know Deshaun Watson is supposed to come back. We'll see how that kind of unfolds. But this offense goes through Nick Chubb. He's super durable, which is good for the Browns. But at the same time, you've seen what other teams have done where they just absolutely pound their running back and eventually they run out of steam. So I'm not in on the Browns. I don't think they're going to finish where they're starting right now. So second team, on that Super Bowl hangover list, I thought was the Rams. They're starting to take form now, starting to pick up a little bit of steam, but I'm not ready to call them for real. I don't think they look as good as they did last year. For whatever reason, I think they have a lot of really good stars on that team, but outside those stars, I don't think they have a lot of other good pieces, supporting cast members. So Browns, I'm still, up for debate. And then the team that I don't know, a lot of people probably have a lot of mixed feelings on the Bucs. You can never really count Brady out, but honestly, he hasn't looked great this year. He really has not looked that great. I know, injuries with his offensive guys, Chris Godwin, Julio Jones, and then a suspension with Mike Evans. Who knows if Mike Evans played last week? I mean, maybe they win. I don't know. But I'm not ready to say that they're for real. I need to see more out of Brady. He almost looks to me a little bit disinterested. I'm not going to go there yet, but he hasn't been as fired up to me. And they just haven't looked the same. And I really think they could come out of the NFC still, though. I think they have a legitimate shot to do that as well. So we're still waiting to see what happens with the Bucs. I'm not going to categorize them in for real yet. They're definitely not frauds. They're good enough. Their defense is playing awesome, but it's just that offense, which honestly, in past years, has been the anchor of that team. I mean, defense has always been solid, but the offense just needs to pick it up. Next, John, I got two more teams here. First, we'll go to Dallas. And Dallas is solely based on what do they look like when Dak comes back. That's one of my biggest questions I have left unanswered. And I think, obviously, it's going to be unanswered until he does come back, which is a little bit different than other unanswered questions that we've had on the show before. But they didn't look good with him week one either, though. I don't know if that was just week one jitters. Who knows? But Cooper Rush has got them to 2-0 with him starting. I mean, he's kept them afloat, and we'll just see what happens when they come back. So that's another team I'm sure we'll have moved them on this list at some point throughout the year. But for now, I'm going to leave them up for debate. And then finally, my beloved Chargers. I don't know why I said beloved. I'm not a Chargers fan. I just really like Herbert.
You are, though. I swear. You love the Chargers. Keenan Allen, you would marry him if you could.
Yeah, Keenan Allen's been my number one DFS play for the last 3 or 4 years. But the guy has crazy value. That's not what this podcast is about, though. That's maybe one of the reasons they're on this list, though. Keenan Allen's been out. I know Herbert is dealing with that rib injury now, so that definitely held him back this past week. He did not look the same. So it just depends how long it takes for Herbert to get back to 100%. Because I think the Broncos and the Raiders are kind of leaving that door open for the Chargers. Because I expect two teams at this point to come out of this division in the playoffs. And I know I said 3 at the beginning of the year, but I'm not in on the Broncos anymore, and I'm not in on the Raiders anymore. So I think it's the Chargers. And I just think it's a matter of Herbert's health. So as soon as he's ready, I think they're a force to be reckoned with. I think he's that good.
Yeah, and I'll run through these teams, give you my thoughts real quick. The Bengals, it felt like a get-right game for them, but I still think they sit around 10-ish wins, and potentially I still think they may miss the playoffs. That didn't really change much for me. It was just good to see them kind of get right a little bit against the Jets. Brissett, I think the Browns are just an example of a good coach and having a good backup. They can keep things together and get you some wins, keep them alive. We'll see if they're 500. I think 500 is doable by the time Watson gets back, but Watson might actually hurt him. Dude hasn't played in 2.5 years. It's been a long time since he's played. I think they're frauds. I'm gonna go. I think the Browns are frauds. I'll kind of classify them there. The Rams, no concern at all. I think they're for real. I think it's just a slow start. They got Stafford coming off that Super Bowl, a little sluggish. They played the Bills, got blown out, and they've been improving the last couple of games. They're playing the long game. They're for real. They're already in that category for me. They'll be just fine. The Buccaneers, we talked about them a lot. Brady lost his starting center. He's lost most of his offensive line to injuries. He lost his whole receiving core. That's part of why he looks so bad. It's not a good environment around him right now. The defense is keeping things together. They're winning. They're one of the slowest offenses in and have some of the lowest scoring games in the NFL, they're going to win the NFC South. That division's terrible. We know Panthers, Falcons, Saints aren't going to reel off 10, 11 wins. The Buccaneers are. And I'm going to put them into the for real only because I expect them to get healthy and then progress. Think of 2020 when it was week 12, 13 before they kind of come out of the bye, got in a groove, and went on that Super Bowl run. I don't think they're a Super Bowl contender, but I think they're, I think they're a for real team, or they're going to be for real by the time you get to week 10 or 11. So take that for what it is. But I think the Bucs are going to be fine. Cowboys, week 1 was ugly. I view them as a wild card contender. I don't view them as an NFC championship contender, an NFC East contender. The Eagles are way too good. The Dallas Cowboys are going to be fine, but they're not a threat to make a legit run. They're a 9-10 win team, NFC wild card contender, and maybe have a close loss where they croak at the end of the game. By the way, obviously Dallas fan here, so I'm already predicting what's happened to me my entire freaking life. Justin Herbert, your point there about him needing to heal up, like it's the Chargers, it's like clockwork almost. I mean, it's happened again, and it's going to make them, these injuries. They lost Rashawn Slater. Didn't Bosa get hurt too? Like it's just crazy at this point. I mean, I don't know. Some of these teams, like, at what point do they hire new doctors? Like, at what point? I don't understand it. It happens. I feel like it happens to the Jets every year. I feel like it happens to the Ravens every year. The Chargers. Some of these teams, it's like clockwork where their season, just like is undone immediately by dudes just dropping like flies. And it's always the same teams, it feels like. So I don't know. Someone needs to go back to med school or something. But we'll see. If Herbert can get healthy, we'll see.
I think I read something last week that like the same doctor that punctured Tyrod Taylor's lung a couple years ago when he was operating on him, like it was the one that was taking care of Herbert. So I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why is that guy still a job? What are they doing over there in LA that this guy's got to have some dirt on them if he's still the team doctor? But that's kind of like what leads us into our next point, which I think is just like the questions regarding those 4 debate teams, which I think this is a very fluid conversation because we just kind of touched on this a little bit, but like for the Cowboys, for the Chargers, those are quarterbacks. We'll start with them. Like those 2 teams are fully dependent on their quarterbacks. Obviously we've seen Cooper Rush do enough to get the Cowboys 2 wins. I don't think they were great wins. I mean, they beat the Giants, which is fine. But if Dak returns when he's supposed to, I think it's week 6 against the Eagles, which is kind of like a rude awakening. Like, welcome back to the team. You get to play the top 3 team in the league now. Like, go have fun. So we'll kind of see what the Cowboys are made of when he comes back. Yeah. And I think I know Herbert's playing, which it's hard for me to like judge him versus Dak because Dak's completely off the field. Herbert's still on the field. He still threw for 300 yards this past weekend, but he just doesn't have the same snap. Doesn't look the same. You can tell like he's a little hesitant, doesn't want to get hit as much. Like, and rightfully so. I mean, the guy fractured rib cartilage. I mean, I don't even know what that means, but that's not that's not anything I want.
It means it's bad.
I could imagine. So he's still playing super tough guy, obviously. But those are kind of the main questions around some of those debate teams are these injuries. Yeah. And you go into another team like the Bucs, where they fell on my for debate team. And that's the beauty of that list, is that as weeks go on, these teams move from, we thought they were for real, they're actually for debate. We thought they were for debate, they're for real, or, this team's a fraud, whatever it may be. That's the beauty of that list, is I can definitely see the Bucs being on that for real list week 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever it may be. Like, I just think so much of this comes down to injuries. I mean, if Brady goes down, the Bucs, they're done. But God forbid that happens. I mean, he's losing guys like Chris Godwin and Julio Jones that are 2 huge pieces. I mean, week 1, you saw that offense. That might be one of the best receiving cores of all time on the same field at the same time. I mean, you have a Hall of Famer in Julio Jones, probably a future Hall of Famer in Mike Evans, Godwin, who's already a proven really good receiver, plus Brady, best quarterback of all time, and Leonard Fournette, who's probably a top 10 running back. So it's like that team is phenomenal on offense if they're healthy. And their defense is already showing that they're good enough. Like, they're really good. So when you're lacking the offense on that team, that's the surprise. And it's all due to injuries, and it's eventually going to come back. Those are kind of the only reasons I have those guys on the for debate team. I keep saying the debate team. It sounds weird, but like they're on the for debate.
Welcome to Debate Club with Roster on Media.
So I think Cowboys, Chargers, Bucks, I think they'll be fine. I think all three of them will have good years at the end of the day. But again, it all comes down to those injuries. And then two teams that I really didn't think would be huge contenders, but they lost two super important pieces to their team. The Steelers, TJ Watt, he's done with a torn pec. I mean, former defensive player of the year last year. I know the defense hasn't been their problem this year. It's obviously been the quarterback play and scoring points. But you lose that guy, that's like the heart and soul of your team. So the Steelers, in my opinion, are done. And then Mac Jones just went down last week with a high ankle sprain. I don't know how good Mac Jones actually is, but he seems to make it work in New England. Mm-hmm. And their backup is Brian Hoyer, so I'll take Mac Jones over Brian Hoyer in that system. So Jones, I think, is out for a couple weeks at this point with a high ankle sprain. So I think that's kind of it for the Patriots. It gives the Bills and the Dolphins even more reason to just continue to go upward. So those are kind of my feelings on the debate team. But yeah, I think.
Do you think Kenny Pickett starts in the next couple of weeks? I think he's got to be in there by like week 7.
Yeah, I've been hearing that too. I think he will be. What's the point at this point? It's starting too risky. I mean, he hasn't been good ever in his career, good enough to like take a team somewhere. So I think you might as well use this time to give reps to your backup or to the guy that you are hoping is the next Roethlisberger, which is a long shot, but is the next franchise quarterback. So why not, right? I mean, if you're not going to make the playoffs, and who knows if they will or not, but like I certainly don't think you can look at that team and say that they're Super Bowl contenders. So why not just start giving this guy reps?
You know what's crazy about the for debate, who's a fraud? At 2-1, we didn't even bother to mention the Bears. And you know why? Because they're not even good enough to be in either of those classifications.
They're so bad that they don't make the fraud list. They're so bad.
So the Bears are so bad they don't make the fraud list. Yeah, it's true. I'm glad we.
What a weird start though for the Bears.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, 3 pass attempts and.
Yeah, well, it's like
Will
you see.
Herbert.
Yeah, you see. Well, David Montgomery went down too. That's another thing. But you see, like the Bears sneak out a victory against the Niners. And everyone's like, oh, like, are the Bears good? And then they play the Packers the next week and get absolutely obliterated. So that's why they're not on the list. Neither for real nor the frauds or debate.
The Bears,
I don't think
the Bears could be 3-0 and they would not make any list.
They could be the only 3-0 team. This is an anti-Bears podcast.
Apparently,
they could be the only team left that's 3-0 or undefeated, and I still would not put them on the for real list. And I don't think that's crazy.
No. You just watch them and you know, like, they're just bad. Like, they're just gotten some lucky breaks. You know, I mean, the NFL's a 500 league. A lot of things got to break your way, but you just watch them like, you know, they're just bad. The offensive scheme is bad. I mean, they're running the ball for like 5 or 6 yards per carry. So there's one thing they're doing right. Now they play the Texans and then they played the Niners in a absolute hurricane. So, yeah, I mean, they're terrible. That just popped in my head. I thought it was pretty funny. Glad we could finish the second straight week by just absolutely dunking all over Chicago, who has literally never done anything wrong to either of us. Yeah. Probably a great city. You know, I mean, they seem like nice people. It's just, I think the Bears are just so frustrating to watch. You like pull for them to lose, and you're like, my God, why do they have 2 wins and how? You know, I think I'm just forever mad at that organization for what they've done to Justin Fields. He looks even worse this year, and it's not going to get better. And he had so much potential. And I think I'm just bitter. That's it. At the end of the day, bitter at the Bears here at the Around the League podcast.
He'll still make $30 million, so it's okay.
Yeah, he'll be fine. Well, Well, Rob, I've enjoyed this one. I think this was fun. As we head into week 4, we'll kind of see who's for real, who's a fraud, who's up for debate. And no matter what, the Bears still suck. That's what's going to happen. If they're 3-1, they will not be on the list. Sorry, Chicago. Like, I have no problem with you guys.
They have to win a Super Bowl for me to be convinced.
Oh, gosh. Poor Chicago. We'll never be convinced then. Who's got a better shot, the Jets or the Bears? At, like, winning a Super Bowl?
Jets.
The Jets? I probably agree there.
I'm not a Jets fan.
It's bad, too.
It's not because I'm a Jets fan. It might be.
Yeah, Jets fans are, like, the most brutal on the Jets. So for you to say that,
I think they have like good talent, honestly, and we don't have to really go down this rabbit hole. But I think they have good talent, and if Zach Wilson turns out to be good, we'll see. I mean, the second overall pick,
missing a quarterback. That's it.
Yeah, the second overall pick is supposed to be, a franchise changer. But we've also seen the Jets whiff on those picks in the past, so. Knock on wood, it doesn't happen again, but we'll see. I mean, he comes back, I think, week 5 or 4. I don't know. Yeah. Week 5 is Miami, so that would be a tough one to come back to, but I think he's on track for that at least, so we'll see.
I think he's starting this week against the Steelers, which is a brutal game to come back.
Is it, though?
Dude, I feel like it is because, the Steelers they just, like, kind of throw haymakers at you, and always Tomlin always seems to scheme things up against these young quarterbacks. That's the thing. Is like I agree the Steelers took some blows, especially with TJ Watt being out, but Tomlin always grinds his way to 500 when he has a bad team. He just doesn't go like 4-12 or 4-13. You know, like he just doesn't. He's a really, really good coach, and I think that's why they're going to end up being fine long term. 7-8 wins this year, but they'll find a way to get there. And I think they'll scheme something up against Zach Wilson and Mike LaFleur and make it pretty tough on him. So I think for that reason, in that secondary, it's a little tougher to return.
Yeah, that's a good point. But the Jets schedule is just brutal.
Yeah, you guys don't have like a good matchup to like week 10 or 11. You guys got a brutal schedule. Yeah, man, I've enjoyed this. I'm glad we could derail it by talking about all the really, really good teams in the NFL at the end of this podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, y'all stay tuned for next week's show, reviewing what happens in week 4. We'll have more contenders for you and everything next week, more discussion items. Let us know what you thought in the comments. Like, rate, review, and check out our other shows. Go to rostermedia.com, linked in the show notes. And see if you can find your team. If your team's not there, reach out. Let us know if you're interested in writing, doing a podcast. We've got a solid team here putting together content. It keeps flowing out. Check out our team pods if you're a fan of what we have going on right now. And, of course, you can find us on social at Roster Up Media. You can find him at RobMcW24, and you can find me at Cody Engel. Thanks for tuning in. Everyone, enjoy week 4.